What do they call the three holes in the ground? Well. Look who decided to dig up. Now, in case you somehow forgot to read a video title, or might not be able to, which is very unfortunate, today we're digging up the graves of the 18th and 19th centuries, known for the Enlightenment and Romanticism, served with a side dish of the American Revolution, Napoleonic conquests, and the War of 1812. We'll also talk about Mary Shelley, a very well-known author from the 19th century who wrote Frankenstein, and of course in casual style, the British stole the idea for their own use. What a surprise. The Romanticism also created the Gothic theme, and no, not the one associated with depressed teenagers, but the literary theme that is seen in books like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So get your shovels and gloves, and let's rob these caskets for their worth. Before I throw spaghetti at your face with meatballs filled with juicy, mouth-watering analytical information, we're going to need some historical context as to why the Romanticism and Enlightenment came to be. The Enlightenment's beginning date, no, not the fruit. No, I mean date, no, not going out with somebody. No, I mean, anyways, it began in 1715, although this date did come from Wikipedia, and everyone loves Wikipedia, right? Anyways, the real date...
Oh, here we go again.
No, we're not doing this again. The real beginning of the Enlightenment is actually 1687, being inspired by the scientific revolution. What a surprise, where people started to value, get this, science over religion.
Oh my God. I get it.
I know, crazy.
Crazy? I was crazy once. They locked me in a room. A rubber room. A rubber room with rats. And rats make me crazy. Crazy. I was crazy once. They locked me in a room. A rubber room. A rubber room with rats. And rats make me crazy.
And this is where the scientific method was most likely born. I didn't actually bother to research this, so, oh well. The Enlightenment, like its cousin, the scientific revolution, inspired a new way of thinking that people want to implement into every aspect of life, like governments, religion, family, and so on. To achieve this, they started to value human rights, unfortunately, just not women's rights, thought, and reason, over what your mom could remember from middle school. While the Enlightenment is not exactly seen throughout the American Revolution or the War of 1812, we definitely see it in Napoleon's revolution, government, and military. Instead of just putting a bunch of Richie Riches in charge, Napoleon actually valued skill over wealth. I guess that's why the British had such a skill issue with their army at the time. With a well-functioning government, something the French would never see again, Napoleon was able to grow France into a place of wealth and prosperity. But the Napoleonic Wars also gave rise to Romanticism. This was due to the bloodshed, starvation, and rampant violence that followed after the French Revolution and during the Napoleonic conquests, where it allowed expression for culture and painted a picture of human creativity, although one compared to its overreaching cousin, the Enlightenment, makes it seem like an excuse to not do your academic work.
Emotional damage.
Romanticism, at first, was a counterbalance to the Enlightenment and the absolute rule of kings, trying to express humanity and nature rather than confining them to tyranny and a more logical way of thinking, like the Enlightenment.
Later
on, however, the Romanticism also was trying to counterbalance the Industrial Revolution, basically fighting a three-war front if you think about it. And when compared to the Benelux in World War II, it didn't really stop anything. As kings like the Tsar were still around, the Enlightenment was as strong as ever, and the Industrial Revolution wasn't affected as seen by China producing a fluff ton of lead in the modern era. What Romanticism did do, though, was give a rebirth to culture, as we see in paintings, writing, theater, architecture, etc. It also gave rise to a new question of what it meant to be human. Now let's talk about Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley was born in 1797, belonging to the parents of Mary Wollstonecraft, who was a writer for women's rights. and lived from 1759 to 1797. And William Godwin, a writer for political justice who lived from 1756 to 1836. Now, if you have a keen ear, then you would have noticed, or you would have heard, that Mary Shelley's mother died the same year she was born. To be more precise, Mary died and Mary was born. A little bit confusing. Mary Shelley, at the age of 17, decided to leave to go get some milk and promptly never returned. That is to say, she ran away from home with her already married husband, who was Percy Bysshe Shelley. Unfortunately, not Percy Jackson, but you get what you get. And her stepsister, Clara Claremont. I know, what a creative last name. Percy Shelley was a famous poet who lived from 1792 to 1822. When Shelley had her first baby girl in 1850, in 1815, she died a month later, and in 1816, her only son died at the age of 3. So that same year, while grieving, she decided to go to Geneva for a nice summer vacation that your family forces you to have fun on. Unfortunately for Shelley and her party crew, Mount Tamaro didn't get the newest $2,000 Barbie doll house and threw a fit. That is to say, it erupted and covered the skies with black ash. So while all stuck inside a cabin on Lake Geneva, just like you and your friends in Vegas, they created a bet between Lord Byron, a good friend of Shelley's, and a famous, or to some people infamous, romantic poet, and John Polidori, who was Bison's personal physician as well as a writer. From this, we finally get Frankenstein. Within Frankenstein, there are plenty of references and allusions to other books, poems, and philosophical ideas that are about the Romanticism or Enlightenment. One of these references is an excerpt from Paradise Lost, written by John Milton. Paradise Lost is one of the greatest works of English literature, where the book-long poem covers the biblical story of the fall of Satan from heaven, not hell, and how the creation of Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. This story portrays Satan's jealousy of how Adam always had the best treatment in heaven without basically doing anything, while Satan was mistreated even when he tried his best. This story is a new portrayal of Satan as a potential heroic figure rather than pure evil. This connects to Frankenstein, as Frankenstein's monster feels like Satan in this situation, but wasn't his fault for being mistreated, and serves as a justification for the monster's actions and his threats. Interestingly, Frankenstein's monster doesn't know the difference between what's real and what isn't. So when he's reading this information, he's taking it as true rather than as a mythological story or religious representation of Satan. The reference to this in the book Frankenstein is when the monster was learning to read. So it also shows how he was able to self-educate, much like Frankenstein himself. Now we're going to talk about the relationships of each character in Frankenstein, what themes they represent, and their interconnected personalities. First, we have Robert Walton, where in his early life, he dreamt of being an explorer, as he was, quote, inspired by this wind of promise, my daydreams become more fervent and vivid, end of quote. Although his father's dying wish was for him to not become an explorer, he went on to be one anyways. From his letters at the beginning, we learn how his education was self-taught out of his passion he had for wanting to explore the natural world. We also know that he doesn't have any true friends, and how he's somewhat isolated. What Walton expresses is the romanticism, to preserve and explore the natural world, trying to find the next big discovery. When his ship sets sail for the polar ice caps, it's not too long until we're introduced to Victor Frankenstein, who was stranded on a small iceberg. Victor is supposed to seem like he represents the Enlightenment, having an interest in the more unethical sciences, getting devoured by his passion. But he also definitely has romanticism moments, such as in page 85, where it is stated by Victor, "We beheld immense mountains, precipices overhanging us on every side." The fact that Victor even acknowledges these mountains as immense shows how he does admire the natural world. Walton considers Victor his first true friend. When Walton tells Victor of his dream, Victor seems not all that supportive of his passion and dream. and decides to tell Walton his story. Victor does this for a reason. It's to try and warn Walton of discovering too much knowledge or getting too indulged in your passion to the point of pushing away the people you love, becoming isolated and almost depressed in a way. From Victor, we get how he created the monster and the monster's story on how he self-taught himself English and literature, understanding the ideas of the world and how he isn't accepted. The monster and Frankenstein have much more similarities than you might have originally thought. While Victor chose to be isolated, the monster was forced to be isolated for not being human. Victor regrets how the monster killed William, while the monster regrets scaring the villagers in the cottage. Victor, before creating the monster, was hungry for knowledge and became isolated, while the monster was hungry for knowledge to try and socialize with people. While there are many comparisons between Victor and the monster, there is one major question within this book. And that question is, what does it mean to be human? How are you human? Why are you human? These are questions the monster asked Victor in the book, and that the use of justification in humanity isn't fair. The monster is seeking the exact answer the romanticism was chasing after, and yet there are many answers to this question. But humanity isn't a single question. However, you can answer this question for yourself, and that will be true. If you made it to the end of this mad scientist rant, then thank you for paying attention to me, and not your phone. And I'll see you goofy goobers next time.